Hello, my name is Bob Benenga, and I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to view this video. This autumn, you are going to hear a lot in our church about our hopes and our dreams for the future, and you're going to hear a lot about the concept of stewardship, how important stewardship is in the context of our own personal and family lives, and how important it is for the lifeblood of this church. This is a video on stewardship. You're about to meet two remarkable people, Dawn and Troy Kramer. I've had the pleasure of working with Troy on the church council during the past 6 years, and I know of his deep commitment to this church and his concern for people who are less fortunate. They're going to be very honest with you. They're going to talk about the impact that stewardship has had on their marriage and on their family and on their future life. I think you're going to enjoy and appreciate their comments.
I was with Anderson at the time, but in '93 they shut down the operation that we had going in the Toledo area and was given the option to move back here to our corporate offices. I felt like that was the best opportunity I'd been offered at that time. I kind of made the decision that we would move back here. We downsized the income, didn't downsize any of the bills. So we went from a 2-income family down to a 1-income family. And the most discouraging part by far was how difficult the move was on Dawn.
I was born and raised in Toledo. All my family was there. That was home. I had a job I loved. A move was pretty disruptive. Every single thing in your life is different, and everything that was familiar is now gone. I felt like I made all the sacrifices and he made none. You know, when we were in Ohio, he was my best friend. And then when you move here, I felt that I didn't have him anymore.
I'd work 100 hours a week to make sure everything was okay. I remember her response to me at the time was, "I'm not looking for a husband that works 100 hours a week."
I just didn't feel like he understood. He was just sort of downplaying everything.
I had gotten to the point where I was kind of bitter about our relationship. And I mean, there's parts of me that were like, come on already, get over it. I felt terrible about how she felt. I just didn't know how to help her make the adjustment. The coworker that I had was a pretty strong Christian. He asked me a lot of questions because he knew that we were struggling at home. It started to become more clear to me that God was not playing a very central role in our lives, that the sacrifices I was willing to make for work were certainly not what she wanted. So what became more clear to me was, if I'm going to talk about my wife and my family being the most important things to me, I need to start not making decisions that put other things above that without much more consideration about the impact it was going to have on them. I grew much more determined to focus on the spiritual responsibilities and try to grow my relationship with Christ. We became actively engaged in a church, St. Andrews, and it really started to paint a much different picture about what a husband's role is and a father's role is and what a man's relationship with Christ should be. And one of the sermons got into the subject of tithing. I felt like I knew what tithing was. You know, we gave every week we were there. He gets into this whole thing. It's about first fruits and 10%. And as I'm sitting there listening to them, this is becoming clear to me. They want 10%? And then it's like our offerings are over and above that. So if you want to make an offering, you get a tithe first, and then we'll be glad to accept an offering too. And I really was kind of offended by the whole idea of it. You know, at this time we had 2 kids, we had another one on the way. Even if I wanted to do this, we were in a scenario where I'd already made financial commitments that weren't going to allow the tithing. That first Promise Keepers event really hammered home this idea of what my role as a husband is supposed to be. In the course of a weekend, really understanding how poor of a job I had done in preparing her for this move. So in terms of asking for forgiveness, there was a lot I was asking for forgiveness for. I was committed to moving forward and doing a better job. One of the things I'd prayed about going into that event was about this whole tithing subject. I remember sitting there in that prayer going, is this the answer to the prayer I had coming in there? And I felt like it had moved me closer to what ultimately the answer was. But so those two key takeaways out of that event were really, for me, somewhat life-changing, both in terms of how I look at my relationship with Dawn, how I look at my relationship with the kids, and really where my priorities should be. First and foremost, to have a relationship with Christ.
Well, I remember when he came home that night, and I heard him come in, and I remember going out to the kitchen, kind of leaning against the counter. Came to the top of the stairs, and it was dark. I had most of the lights out. And I was just like, so, how was it? He walked towards me, and I thought, what's going on? And he got down on his knees, and he wrapped his arms around my legs and apologized.
I felt that, that we might have that opportunity after this. This might be enough of a breakthrough to where we can start to rebuild this thing. We went to church the next morning, and to this day, every time we go to church, the check is already written up. Dawn handles the checkbook. When that time comes, we drop it in the offering plate. On that particular morning, we walk in, having gone through this mountaintop experience, still wondering if the direction I had been given through prayer and with the Spirit and stuff about tithing was really telling me to clearly do it. And everything about the gospel message that day and about the sermon was about living in faith and taking a faith step and what that really meant. It became very clear to me that the reason I was struggling with the tithing, I think, is because I was looking at it from a financial standpoint and not as much of a faith standpoint, just faithfully trusting in God's word and following it. So during the sermon, I'm thinking, this is something we got to start doing. When it came time for the offering, she just handed me the checkbook and she said, you decide when we're going to start that. So that was the first day we wrote out a tithe check. Literally, we had gotten paid the Friday before that. We had like $10 left in the checking account for the next 2 weeks. Really going to be interesting to see how this works out. But I'm telling you, I walked out of church that day just feeling like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders, because collectively I felt like we had made the decision to start tithing. It was just a very clear sign. I'm with you. I'm going to take care of everything. You just don't have to worry about it. And literally from that day forward, I've never worried about it. It just was such a huge blessing because we had taken a faith step that we had never done before.
It was nice that the relationship was getting better at the same time and we were getting closer to God. It soon became apparent to me that it was actually the right thing to do. I really watch our money, and I don't bat an eye when it comes to writing a tithe check. We might argue over if we should order a pizza that night because it's going to be $20, but I'll think nothing of getting that check out and writing it for our church. It's just my faith is so strong in that area, and I know that He will cover us.
What I really learned is that none of this was a financial decision. This was all a faith decision. Once I kind of realized that, and once we took a step in faith, He's proven Himself to be faithful to us. We were laying there that night and talking before we went to sleep, and you had your head on my shoulder. You were like, I really feel like things are different. I feel like I did when we first met. That was such a dramatic change from where we had been, and it was in such a short time frame. It really felt like those walls had been broken down and that there was a connection we hadn't had in so long. I really felt like our marriage had been healed just right at that moment.
It just felt exactly like that, like everything just came together. Very much like a healing and a transformation of sorts. Now we look back and we're like, I'm so glad we moved here. I mean, we love it here, and it changed our lives.
Our relationship had been blessed. Our relationship with Christ had been blessed. It had gotten stronger, and it just gave us a different outlook and perspective on almost everything that we had to face. Anybody that's considering it, I would just so much encourage, just don't look at it from a financial standpoint. Pray to understand what God's will is. If you feel any kind of calling from the Spirit, I would tell you, jump on that horse and ride it, because that's where the blessings and the satisfaction come from. Yes, there'd be financial blessings to the church if that happened, but much more so than that, there'd be the spiritual blessings for the individuals in the congregation. I'm telling you, back in the day when we were making this decision, we had house payment, 2 car payments, insurance payments, family of 4, one on the way, a certain amount of food each month. Take my income, 10% of that, absolutely did not have enough money for that. And it's worked out beautifully.
It's that leap of faith. It's him saying that he'll provide and us believing that he will.
As you can tell, Troy and Dawn had a life-changing experience when they started tithing. It helped heal relationships, and it gave them a new focus on the future. If there's one thing that I've learned in the 14 years that I've been a member of this church, it is this. This is truly, truly a generous church. It is amazing the things that have happened just last year. We had over 12,000 meals prepared for people who were hungry. It's amazing if you were to come here on a Thursday night and see people come, and they often comment at the end of the evening how thankful they are for a good meal. Just before winter last year, a call went out for winter coats to the members of our congregation. And all of a sudden, within a short period of time, 900 coats were delivered. The coats were really, literally everywhere in rooms. People came from the community grateful that they could get a winter coat for the rough months ahead. Probably the most amazing statistic I can give to you is that during this past year, 77 families who were homeless found temporary shelter because of the efforts of people in this congregation. This congregation has a history of being generous, and I know it will continue to be generous. Now, I'd like to ask in all seriousness that you consider the amount of money that you give to the church this coming year. What we want to do is we want to double. Yes, we want to double the number of people that this church serves. We have a tremendous compassion for the teenagers in our community, young people who are homeless, young people who have lost their way in life. And this coming year through Treehouse Ministries, we hope that we can make a renewed effort in order to help them. We want to continue to give you stirring music in the sanctuary that really absolutely nourishes our soul and our being. And we want to make sure that every individual who walks through the doors of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church feels closer to God because they were here. We prayerfully and we humbly ask you for your support during this coming year. Thank you.